record this so that we can get this on the record, and if we ever need to review it, it'll be available to you on YouTube probably later today or over the weekend sometime. Anyway, as you can see from the screen, lines have been muted. If you do want to talk to me, if you do have a question, by all means, you can chat with me, and I will do my best. I may not always see that in a timely manner, but I'll definitely go through those questions if there are any at the end. All right, so as I always want to mention a few kind of highlights, by our injury illness prevention program, every branch is required to have monthly branch safety meetings. And what I've been telling branches as I've been visiting them is that this is really easy. This can be considered part of your branch safety meeting. Just by being here, and then what I suggest is at the end is hold it over for another, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes and talk about how are you going to apply what we talked about today. And then you can also talk about any injuries that have occurred in the last month and what lessons learned or procedures you could change with regard to that situation. And then document it on the branch safety meeting form, which can be found on One Strong Team. Then go to Safety Documents, and there it is. So I will hope you do that. Excuse me. As always with NurseLine, we always want to try to use NurseLine whenever possible. But again, if this is clearly an injury that has already been seen by the doctor, or clearly is an injury that needs to be seen, such as you can see fatty tissue in the laceration, that's not first aid anymore. That is definitely, or self-care, that is definitely a stitches issue. Or if you suspect a concussion, any type of head injury, that always requires treatment rather than calling NurseLine. Also want to remind you of OSHA's new reporting rule. I need to be known immediately, as in a phone call, for any work-related fatality, any inpatient hospitalization. So anytime someone goes to beyond the emergency room, really give me a heads up when they go to the emergency room and you think that they might not be just in and out, so that we can get that information prepared, and so we're timely. Also, work-related amputations, even a loss of a fingertip, just the pad of the finger, is considered an amputation. Any work-related losses of an eye. Penalty for not timely reporting is $5,000. So unless you've got $5,000 burning a hole in your pocket or in your branch's pocket, it behooves you to call me right away. And also, as always, I want to emphasize the specialized assessments. Each branch has this binder someplace. Hopefully, many of you now are using these. And again, the idea is that, whenever someone applies, they always take the general assessment test. But with this, and that general assessment test covers, 26 different topics. What the specialized assessment does is it looks specifically at construction, manufacturing, hospitality, and waste, and addresses 14 questions specific to that. So it's kind of like, as I always like to mention, it's kind of like a Boy Scout merit badge. So they've studied this material, and then now they've earned this merit badge. And if you're sending out two people, if you have a choice between two people going out to a construction site, one has completed the specialized assessment and one has not, who's the better choice? So something to think about in that aspect. So let's talk about heat-related illness. This is, obviously this has been a very crazy May and June. We've had some, even in April, we've had some weather that is not unique, or is not expected for this type of area. I mean, you know, we've been getting 90s and 100s, and we should still be in these nice 60s and 70s. It's crazy, right? But you know, we are getting into the official summer season this month, or later this month, and so we really want to talk about why this is important. This is particularly important for Washington because Washington is one of the 2 states that has a standard specific to heat stress. So I'm going to have a special announcement at the end of this telling the Washington branches what they need to do. So let's get into this. So what we'll talk about today is how your body regulates heat, environmental and personal factors that contribute to heat illness, what we need to do to identify, evaluate, and control exposure, the importance of acclimatization, and the different types of heat-related illnesses, their signs and symptoms, and how to treat them. So let's get right into this. Let's take a little Physiology 101 course. So your body controls the temperature or thermoregulation through 2 systems. One is a behavioral system. It's voluntary. It's based on an air-skin interface. And how I like to describe this is, let's say it's January, and you just woke up. You got to let the dog out to do their business, right? So you step on the back patio. You got to supervise it because it digs. What are you doing when you do that? Well, you're more than likely you are crossing your arms and hunching over because it's cold out. You just got out of a nice warm bed, out of a nice warm house, and now you're stepping out into 28, 30 degree temperatures, and it hurts. And so you're actually trying to minimize that air-skin interface because of the cold. However, the system that we're really looking at is the physiological system. It's voluntary. It's based on your internal core temperature, and your body either generates or dissipates heat through radiation, convection, and evaporation. However, you know, one of the things, if you remember back to your 8th grade science class, you know, the science teacher actually talked about conduction. So we're going to talk about each of those. Let's start with conduction. So conduction is the transfer of heat through physical contact between 2 objects. So imagine this. As in this diagram, you've got a candle, you've got a steel rod, and you're holding it. Well, you stick it over the flame long enough, and what happens? Your hand starts to get really hot, and you drop the rod. Clearly enough, so you understand what's happening is the heat is transferring or conducting through that metal rod to your hand. This is rather insignificant with regard to heat stress. Think of it as in, you know, when last time you went to a August football, you know, preseason football game, and you sat on the aluminum bleachers, and you sat down and you went, whoa, that's hot. But 15 minutes later, you didn't pass out because you were overheating because you were sitting on a hot bench. So this really has minimal influence. Radiation, though, is the light heat emitted from a surface of an object through waves due to the object's temperature. So imagine we go to a picnic and we're under a nice shaded tree. You step out of that shaded tree, and all of a sudden you feel the rays of heat from the sun. That's radiation. At normal room temperature, your body releases about 67% of its heat through radiation. So most of us probably right now are in a place that has normal room temperature, you know, 72, give or take a few degrees. Most of your body temperature is being released just by your blood getting to the surface and eliminating that heat. It does this through 2 things. One is through vasoconstriction, especially in the winter when it gets cold. Vaso means vein, constriction means getting smaller. So your body actually limits its heat through making your veins smaller. However, in the summer, it's called vasodilation. Vaso meaning vein, dilation meaning getting bigger. And in that, it releases heat. Vigorous exercise increases this by 10 times. So you know, after you exercise, you notice that your skin is very hot or very red, and that's because your body is radiating that heat that you've been developing. So I want you to pay attention to these slides and how these numbers change. So in this diagram, the guy in the center his skin temperature is 90 degrees. The air is 75 degrees. In this situation, they're radiating 67% of their heat loss. 10% is through conduction of air or convection. We'll talk about that in a moment. And evaporation is 23%. So you can see most of the heat, 2/3 of the heat is being radiated through, is being eliminated through radiation. So let's talk about convection. Convection is the heat transfer of a gas or a liquid by circulation of currents from one region to another. So if you went to Home Depot or Lowe's or your favorite appliance store this evening and you said, I'm shopping for a convection oven, what would make that oven unique? Well, what it has is a fan, and it circulates that hot fan. So rather than having that cheap, apartment oven with an element at the bottom and top where you burn your cookies from the bottom up, this actually circulates that hot air, so we actually burn them all the way around evenly. And so what it is it's the movement of air. We often talk about this in the winter when it's a cold and windy day. The meteorologist will talk about wind chill. What that means is that they will say, it's 40 degrees, but with this 30-mile-an-hour wind, it feels like it's 33 or something like that. What's happening is that you're building a warm layer of air around your skin, and when the wind hits it, it blows that layer away. So all it hits then is your skin directly, and it makes the air feel colder. So let's look at this diagram again. Again, the person's skin temperature is 90 degrees. Air temperature is now up to 86 degrees. Radiation, look at this, has dropped from 67% down to 41%. Evaporation is still pretty much at the same level it was, but look at this. Conduction to air or convection is up to 33%. This is why the perfect picnic conditions is 85 degrees with a nice breeze, because it's warm enough for you to enjoy the summer. However, that wind, it just picks up all the heat that you've been accumulating and blows it away. Evaporation is the conversion or change of a liquid into a vapor. So this morning when you were boiling your hard-boiled eggs, when you put the eggs in the pan and the water was up to the top of the egg level. 10-15 minutes later, where was the water level? Well, it was below the shell of the egg, or the top of the egg. The eggs didn't swell. What happened was that you lost water. You converted a liquid into a vapor by making steam. Physical fitness allows sweating, and this is where we're going to get this, is sweating to start at lower body temperatures. This is critical because if you're not in good physical condition, your body isn't going to start sweating until the very last moment. The example I like to make is, if you're a gym rat, the time you probably hate going to the gym the most is right at the beginning of the year. Because what do all of us do on January 1st? We all have resolutions. One of those resolutions is to get fit. Now all of a sudden people start running into literally the gym and start crowding people out of the treadmills. So imagine this: you step into this gym and you start running next to this experienced gym person, and you start running and you're doing pretty well, and about 5-10 minutes later you realize that you are way hot, you're sweating profusely, and you look over to this person next to you and they've got 2 beads of sweat on their forehead. Well, what happened? Well, when you walked into that gym, your body realized that you were not ready to do this, and that you were just fooling yourself and nothing was going to really happen. And so it didn't bother starting to sweat until it realized that it was overheating, and then it had to make up for lost time. The person next to you, the experienced gym person, realized as soon as they started running, their body went, oh, got it. I'm starting to exercise. I need to start sweating right away. And so they were able to maintain their body temperature much earlier than you were able to. So here's this diagram again. The skin temperature is 90 degrees. The temperature now is 95 degrees. Radiation, look at this, has dropped to 4%. Convection has dropped to 6%. And evaporation has increased from, 26% up to 90%. This is why evaporation, this is why water or liquid is so important for the management of heat, especially when you're at these temperatures. And so we'll get into how this all plays into it. So let's talk about the environmental factors that contribute to the risk of heat-related illness. Obviously, the direct sun, heat, and humidity plays a huge factor. Obviously, if you're in direct sun, you're going to get hotter. Temperature, humidity, we'll talk about that in a moment, and limited wind also plays a factor. As I mentioned, that 85-degree perfect picnic day conditions. So let's combine some of these factors that we talked about earlier. Let's combine convection and evaporation. So the point is, wind helps dissipate heat. We learned that when we talked about that perfect picnic condition. However, in temperatures greater than 95 degrees, wind actually adds to the heat load to the work of the worker. And how I experienced that is I arrived one time in Oakland, California, and they were experiencing a heat wave. I think it was like 105 degrees or something like that, which is pretty warm for the Bay Area. Well, I grew up without air conditioning in my car, so that's kind of my go-to when it's hot, and I enjoy the breeze. So I got my rental car and I drove away from the airport, and I rolled down all the windows, and it was nice breeze. However, about 5-10 minutes later, all of a sudden my body started panicking. I was overheating all of a sudden. So I roll up all the windows, put on the air conditioning to full blast, and I saved myself. Well, what happened? Well, what happened was that I was literally cooking myself in my car with the hot wind. So this is critical. I mean, we don't usually experience a lot of 95-degree days with a high wind. However, the folks like in Phoenix and in Las Vegas, they get a lot of wind. So this is a huge factor for them. But it's something to keep in mind, especially during heat waves, especially if we get a little bit of breeze, that can add to that heat load. Next, let's talk about temperature and humidity. Cooling occurs by evaporation. Evaporation occurs in dry environments. The higher the humidity, the less evaporation. So the example I like to give is we're going to go to two of the happiest places on earth. We're going to go to Disneyland. We're going to go to Disney World. So let's imagine, if you've ever been to any place east of the Rockies during the summer, you've experienced humidity and what that feels like. I mean, especially if you've stepped off of an airplane. I mean, in a few weeks, I'm going to be going to North Carolina, and I'm dreading that time when I step off that airplane onto the jetway and feel that humidity just hit my shoulders. And it's like, oh. The water is saturated with water. And the whole point is that cooling occurs by evaporation. Evaporation occurs in dry environments. In North Carolina, what I'm going to experience, I'm going to experience high humidity. The air is going to be saturated. So when I sweat, the sweat isn't going to go anywhere because evaporation only occurs in dry environments. So I'm going to be cooking myself and my own juices, essentially. So this is what it kind of looks like. So let me get my pointer out here. So if what we're looking at is, so we're going to go to Disneyland. It's 90 degrees. Let's see, it's 90 degrees and it's 40% humidity. So we go over here to 40, we come down to 90, and it says here that it feels like it's 93 degrees. The temperature is actually 90, but because of the humidity, it feels like it's 93. However, let's now go to Orlando, to Disney World. Again, it's 90 degrees, but it's 90% humidity. So again, we start here at 90 degrees, and we come up here to 90% humidity, and we come down. And it feels like, look at this, it feels like it's 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And why that is because it's so hot and so humid that any sweat that you produce doesn't go anywhere. It just sits on your skin, and you're literally, like I said, cooking in your own juices. So this plays a huge factor in those situations. Other environmental factors, obviously, if you're working with close to an engine, if workers are working close to engines, internal combustion meaning fire, that's heat, right? Welding and any hot materials and heat being reflected from the ground can also play a huge, factor. For instance, on a paving job. Obviously, the harder you work, the more heat you can produce. PPE can actually kill you. So what PPE often does is it keeps temperatures, it keeps your heat inside your body rather than letting it radiate or evaporate. So with this guy, what we've got is he's wearing a rain suit, or oftentimes referred to as a chemical suit. Well, this keeps the liquids off of him, but what does it also do? It also keeps the liquids inside of him. So he could be in the Mojave Desert, 90 degrees, but 5% humidity, and he's going to suffer from heat stress because all the sweat and heat is staying within the suit. So it's important that PPE is always taken off during all breaks to allow the body to cool off. Also avoid heavy clothing, multiple layers, and dark colored clothing. Other personal factors that make you more susceptible to heat-related illness include dehydration. Obviously, you need to drink more when it's hot. Whenever you're sick, your body is not releasing the heat as well as it used to. And whenever there's a loss of electrolytes. One of the key ways you can manage that is by drinking, of course, water, but also supplementing that with things like Gatorade well, that's the most famous. But what that does is it provides potassium, it provides sodium to replace some of those nutrients that you're losing through your sweat. So it replaces that. Usually our American diet is high enough in sodium, but this always adds a little bit more to it. Other personal risk factors is age. Infants and elderly, the infants have forgotten how to manage their, or haven't figured out how to manage their heat. The elderly, though, have forgotten how to manage their heat, so their bodies aren't working it quite as well as they used to. Weight, if you think about what keeps the whales alive in the North Pacific and North Atlantic, it's their blubber, it's their fat. So if you are overweight, or if our workers are overweight, they're not going to get rid of their heat as well as someone who has less weight. We talked about personal fitness. Obviously, if you're physically fit, you're going to start sweating sooner. Also, medical conditions. If a worker has heart condition or diabetes, that means the blood isn't getting to the surface of the skin as well to radiate that heat. And it's kind of like your car, your water pump not working. It's going to overheat, and if your water pump for your body isn't working, it's also going to overheat. Then also certain medicines can also play a factor in it. Everything from water pills or diuretics. what that does is it causes you to urinate more often. Well, if you're urinating all your liquids out, you can't sweat it out. Same thing with laxatives. It adds water to the stool, and so if you're well, let's just say it, you're pooping out all your water, you are not able to sweat it out. So drugs can have a huge impact on your ability to manage your water and manage your body's heat. Other personal factors, sugary added drinks, caffeine in drinks, heavy food, alcohol, and hangovers can play a huge factor. Sugar and heavy foods require blood to go to your gut to digest them. If your blood is going to your gut to digest them, they can't get to your extremities and to your skin as easily to radiate that heat out. Obviously, with caffeine and alcohol, with one beer or one cup of coffee, it's no big deal. Two, no big deal. However, what's happening if you just finished 3 cups of coffee or 3 bottles of beer? All of a sudden, you're running to the bathroom. Again, you're peeing out your liquid rather than sweating it out. Nicotine. Nicotine is a vasoconstrictor. Vaso meaning vein, constrict meaning smaller. So rather than allowing your blood vessels to get very large and get blood to the surface, it actually shunts down the blood to the surface, so you're not radiating as much heat out. Other personal factors is things like people thinking, I'm tough, I don't need a water break, I'm not thirsty, I don't need a drink, I'll lose pay if I take a water break, I'll let my team down, I'm new here, I need to prove myself. These are all huge factors within the minds of our workers, especially those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, and at football practice, water was a privilege. You earned your water breaks, and so water was for sissies. So now, fortunately, in the athletic training world, they've realized that water is critical for athletes' safety. Same thing is true for our workers. It's critical, and we need to make sure we're working with customers who appreciate that our folks, if they're not drinking enough, need to be forced to drink more in order so that we don't have a situation happen. Other things things we can do is work smart. So schedule hardest work in the cooler parts of the day, especially in heat waves. In Phoenix, they start most of their jobs at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in order to avoid working in the heat. Establish a buddy system. As we'll learn, you can't always see the changes occurring within your body, so it's important to monitor each other. Obviously, work in the shade and out of direct sun when possible, and wear light-colored clothing that's lightweight, has natural fibers, and uses a hat with a brim in order to minimize or increase the shade that is available. As I mentioned earlier, remove all PPE during breaks to allow your body to cool off. So water is, if you haven't figured this out, water is critical for heat management. You need to drink small quantities of water. You don't want to drink all the water at once, because when you do that, it's going to overload your kidneys. Your kidneys are going to realize that you've got too much liquid in your blood, and it's going to draw that water out, and you're going to pee it out very quickly. So what you want to do is you want to drink a little bit at a time, so like a cup every 15 minutes. For those of you who have grown up in the South, you understand that how do you cook a frog? You don't drop a frog into a boiling pot of water. What you do is you put them into water, and then you slowly raise the temperature so it doesn't know what's happening. Same thing with, I know some of you are going, ooh, gross, that's sick. But how this applies to this situation is if you give your body a little bit of water throughout the day, like a cup every 15 minutes, you will be adding water to your body, but your body won't recognize it. It's going to go in so slowly that you're going to be able to accumulate that water and have plenty of water to sweat out. So that's kind of how that works. So drink plenty of water, about a cup every 15 minutes. Start work well hydrated, and consider sports drinks. Do not drink pop or other sugary drinks. Don't drink lots of coffee or tea. Now, I know some of us need to start our day with a cup or two first thing in the morning. That's fine. But after that, switch over to non-caffeine laden drinks. Don't drink alcohol, as we mentioned earlier, and don't wait for your thirst before drinking. If you're thirsty, that means you are already behind the 8 ball. So these next series of slides, I know I'm running short on time right now, have to do with acclimatization. And the whole idea is the first heat wave we had, I don't know, in March or something like that, it jumped all the way up to 70 degrees, and we got out the tank tops and shorts and flip-flops, and we were just enjoying the nice warm temperature. Well, imagine what's going to happen in late August when we get a 70-degree day. That occasionally happens, right? All of a sudden, you're going to be going to your storage closet and trying to find where you put your sweaters. It's freezing cold out there. Well, what happened? Your body got used to the temperature, and the same thing happens here. It takes about 10 to 14 days for your body to fully acclimate to the temperature. And what these slides demonstrate is having to do with conductance, having to do with evaporation, and having to do with temperature. Your body goes through changes and it adjusts to the new temperature. So what's important, why this is important, is because people who are new to an environment or new to a hot working environment are more susceptible to that danger of that heat. So we need to pay special attention to new employees, people back from being sick, anyone absent for more than 2 weeks. Again, acclimatization takes between 10 and 14 days. People who have moved from a cooler climate, and everyone during a heat wave event. And if this summer is anything like the spring has been, we might have a lot of those. So let's talk about the different types of heat-related illness. One is heat rash, heat cramps, fainting, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. So heat rash is red blister-like eruptions. It's kind of like diaper rash. It's also called prickly heat because what happens is that the sweat glands become irritated and infected, and it just feels bad. So rest in a cool place, allow the skin to dry, and monitor for infection. Heat cramps, we've all experienced this at some point. This painful spasm, usually in the gut or in a body part like the calf muscle. Rest in a cool place, drink plenty of water or heavy diluted sports beverage. Seek medical attention if the cramping is severe and does not go away. So let's get into the more important ones, heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So let's talk about the difference. So I'm going to go over this list, and I want you to pay attention to this list. And I'm going to go over this fast because I don't want you to focus too closely on this list. Just listen to this. So the symptoms for heat exhaustion is weakness, fatigue, headache, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, dizziness, high pulse rate, extreme sweating, pale face, red face, unsteady gait, clammy or moist skin, normal to slightly elevated temperature. The signs and symptoms of heat stroke are rapid pulse, chills, restlessness, nausea, vomiting, irritability, red face, hot, dry skin, but only in 25 to 50% of the cases, disorientation, high temperature, erratic behavior, shivering, collapse, convulsions, fainting, heat. If you just listen to those two lists, yes, you can definitely identify things that are unique to each. However, do they sound similar? And the answer hopefully is yes. In heat stroke, we've always been taught, hot, dry skin, oh, that's definitely heat stroke. However, if you notice on this, it only says hot, dry skin only occurs in 25 to 50% of the cases. So people have actually stopped sweating only in 25 to 50% of the cases. So that does not make a reliable indicator. What makes a reliable indicator is this. How do you tell the difference between heat stroke and heat exhaustion? You ask them three things. What is their name, what day it is, and where they're at. So person, time, and place. If they cannot answer that, this is heat stroke. I learned this personally when I was a long-haul truck driver. I was going through Mojave Desert. My trainee and I pulled over for some reason. My air conditioning unit wasn't working so well, but it was working a little bit. This car pulls up in front of us, and this guy stumbles out of his car, and he literally is stumbling to us, and he says, "Help me, help me, help me." And we bring him into my truck, and we're pouring water on him and trying to fan him and trying to cool him down, and he's telling telling us, tell my girlfriend I love her. You know, he basically just wanted his last rites. He thought he was on death's door, but he could tell us what his name was, what day it was, and where he was at. So this was definitely heat exhaustion. Heat stroke is when they're delirious. They do not know these answers. So let's talk about the treatment of heat exhaustion. Let's start with that one. So move the person to a cooler shaded area to rest, and if possible, lay the worker down. Don't leave them alone. Loosen and remove heavy clothing that restricts evaporation and cooling. And if the worker is alert and not nauseated, provide them fluids such as cool water, juice, or sports drinks, about a cup every 15 minutes. Fan the person, try to cool them off. Call 911 if they don't feel better in about 15 minutes, and don't further expose them to heat the rest of the day because they've already been overheated. Heat stroke, though, is a medical emergency. This is a 911 call right away. Seconds count, and you need to cool them by whatever means is available. When I was studying to be a paramedic, our instructors said, you need to cool this person down as quickly as possible. Even if you throw them into a cold mountain stream and you throw them into cardiac arrest, that's okay because we can do CPR on them. If you don't cool them down, you won't have anybody to do CPR on. So some examples for cooling methods is immerse the person in a tub of cool water, place the person in a cool shower, spray them with cool water, sponge the person with cool water. If the humidity is low, wrap them in cool sheets. Apply ice packs under the arms and the groin area because there's large blood vessels that are closely exposed to the skin there. Don't have the person sip cool water if they're alert enough, and definitely call 911. But if 911 is delayed, call the emergency room for further instructions. It's important to stop all activity if you're lightheaded, confused, weak, faint, or have a pounding heart or trouble breathing, and always take a break and rest in a cool, shaded area. So, in summary, don't hang up on me yet. I've got some instruction for you. So hold on just a minute. So remember to drink water frequently, know the signs and symptoms of heat-related illnesses and take them seriously. Consider sports drinks when sweating a lot. Avoid alcohol, caffeinated drinks, and heavy meals before and during work. Work smart, acclimate, and wear appropriate clothing. Take regular breaks and keep your eyes on others. All right, so there you have it, heat stress. So Washington branches, would you please email me a copy of your branch safety meeting minutes? I need this so that if Washington L&I ever asks us if we went through heat stress training this year, I can show them that we have. So if you would just scan me a copy and I will keep that file for you if that is ever needed. So again, Washington branches, please email me a copy of your branch safety meeting minutes. And of course, everyone else, you don't have to email it to me, but please, please, please document a branch safety meeting minutes and have a discussion amongst yourselves. So let's see if we have any questions. All right, seems like we've just got greetings on the chat. So with that, I know I've gone over about 8 minutes, so I apologize for that. Hope everyone has a great rest of the great weekend. I will be on PTO next week, preparing to move down to the Salem area, so looking forward to that. Yee-haw. Anyway, hope everyone has a great weekend and a great rest of the month.